going because I think I'm a little bit behind. Yeah, so about 3 minutes. So hi everyone. I don't know any Norwegian, so this is all going to be in English. The Norwegian I know, I like to practice this, is hey. No, hello. See, I even screwed that up. Takk. Yeah. Fisk. Caviar. And I knew what beer was, but I forgot. Is it ull? Ull? Okay, and that's basically everything you need to know, right? Oh, I don't know what beard is, or Viking, but I guess those are some of the Norwegian things. So for the next hour, I'm going to be talking about building 2D worlds with upcoming 2D Unity features. So I really, really hate PowerPoint. I think it's a very, very dull and boring software. So I actually rather just make a game in all live. But I have to do all the PowerPoint stuff because marketing get angry otherwise. So my name's Andy. So this is when my mum said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be Mario. So I became Baby Mario for about 3 years. I showed this photo to a guy who worked at Intel, and he said he still programs on this keyboard. So by that, you can guess I'm about 8 years old. However, I didn't go directly into that. So I guess this is the bit where I talk about my past and all the stuff I've done. So I went from being Baby Mario to founding Facebook, and then starring in one really good Spider-Man movie, and then one really, really shit one. And then that wasn't good, so I became an evangelist. So my whole family thinks I've run away and joined a cult or like a circus, like Scientology, and they assume, I think my nan actually said, so you hang out of planes and do Tom Cruise stuff. So that's what my family thinks I do. I do Tom Cruise stuff, right? But instead, I actually work at a company called Unity. So Unity Technologies, we create a whole bunch of software, but mostly the Unity engine is kind of what we're known for. And I travel around Europe. Can you see that? Yeah. I travel around Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Russia, and sometimes America, basically evangelizing Unity. So like preaching what it can do. I normally do that by workshops and sort of showing off hands-on what people can do with it. Yeah, and stuff like that. And you've probably seen me somewhere running around before, normally drinking coffee and sitting on the floor on my laptop. I actually enjoy playing games as well as making them. So if you are making a game, you're thinking of making a game, you're thinking of using Unity, you made a game and shipped it, you just want someone from Unity to buy your game, so don't send me any games that are like $1 million, because now I have to buy them. You can send them to me via my email here. I'm actually really bad at emails. I'm much better on Twitter, just about everyone else is. So you can contact me via there. And I'll be around today, this evening, and all day tomorrow. So if you want to come say hi, hug, put me in a headlock, play Hearthstone, like, yeah, we'll be out there on like our booth, along with Alex, who is better at Hearthstone than me. Cool, so 2D and Unity. So this is the part where I like to find out people I speak to. So rather than me come up and say some mumbo jumbo, I'd rather find out the people I'm actually speaking to in the room. So put your hand up if you are a programmer, or you write code, or you copy-paste code, all that stuff. Okay, so pretty much everyone. Okay, cool. Put your hand up if you're an artist. Okay, put your hand up if you're a 2D artist. Okay, cool. Put your hand up if you're a UI artist. The job that no one likes. Okay, cool. Put your hand up if you work in audio, so audio design and development. All right. Has anyone got? Yes, you have a beard. Yes. Okay, so I have this theory. So I've given talks around the world, and I have a theory that anytime I ask that, someone put their hand up, and they normally have a beard if they work in games audio, and they're normally in a band or they've been in a band before. No. Can you play an instrument? Okay, that'll do. Yeah, and most of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, it's in a Metallica tribute band as well. I don't know what that is. Metallica and audio in games seem to just go together really well. So I'm super happy that you fit into like my thing. Yeah. Put your hand up if you work in QA. Technically, everyone should put their hands up, but that's okay. Put your hand up if you're a game designer. So it's basically your job to annoy everyone on your team. Okay. Put your hand up if you're a game developer. That's normally a pretty easy question. Okay. Put your hand up if you're a student. Okay. Put your hand up if you're their teacher who's brought them on this field trip. Okay. So they won't be drinking, right? No. Okay. Put your hand up if you have no idea what video games are or anything. You just kind of walked in this room and you're like, this might be fun. Or you thought it might be a giant sauna or something. Okay. Cool. Awesome. So last question. Put your hand up if you use Unity to make games, or you've used Unity before. Okay, this is quite handy. Hopefully no one's coming thinking it's like a religious event or something. So I'm going to talk about 2D and Unity. So 2D and Unity has existed for a long while. A lot of people kind of faked it. So like games like Thomas Was Alone was kind of just cubes. and a lot of people have been doing that for a long, long time. We kind of saw that trend, so we hired a bunch of 2D developers in Finland, and then basically we put them on the task of implementing native 2D, so sprites and sprite sheets and 2D colliders and all that jazz. And we released that, I guess, about like 2 years ago, maybe. I don't really know. And then from that point, we then saw what people wanted to do. So it's incredibly difficult to add new graphics features into 2D because a lot of 2D development in design is based on like how good your artist is or what they've drawn. So what we decided to do with 2D tools in Unity is kind of build functionality into them. So allow ways for people to construct worlds or actually do lots of really sort of really tricky and complex stuff very, very quickly. So that's kind of the whole point of my talk. So what I'm going to be demoing, here is the obligatory list thing, is creating sort of a very simple 2D world, showing off sort of like different line slicing things. So this weird procedural smart sprite name TBD, otherwise our marketing will get really angry if I don't put that. We haven't really got a name for it, so I'm just going to call it probably about 10 different names, but if anyone has a suggestion for this name, then shout it out. Tarmacs and sort of scripting tarmac brushes, which is super awesome. And basically how all this stuff fits together and how this also works with 3D content. So when we're designing these new 2D features, we also like to have some element of 3D kind of, you can use them for 3D stuff as well. So I'll be demoing all that. So I guess this talk is going to be kind of one of the more technical talks. It's not actually that technical. I'm just going to be farting around in the Unity editor doing weird stuff. But hopefully it should be okay. Big fat disclaimer. So all of these features are still in development. I'm going to be using like a pre-alpha version of Unity. So if anything funky happens, not that Unity would ever crash, right? That always gets a laugh. So if anything funky happens or anything weird happens, it shouldn't happen. But if it does, make sure you take photos of it and send it to our @Unity3D account at about 4 a.m. just to wake all our community manager team up. Yeah, they get really angry with me. So make sure you do that, please. Or in Norwegian, because then they have to translate it in Google Translate. But yeah, this is our disclaimer. So if anything funky happens, just kind of like ignore it. Also, some things may change. I mean, the same sort of big features will still be released, but sometimes how they're put together will change. And demo time, because PowerPoint is boring, and we haven't made a PowerPoint export option because we export basically everything else. So hopefully this looks beautiful. Okay, is that viewable from the back? If I do stuff like that, is that viewable? Like, okay, cool, yeah. So I'm going to be doing lots of that sort of like zoomy swipiness. So I have a really simple scene setup. If I run it, so this is Penny Pixel, who's one of our new mascots. So at Unity, we don't like to make all our mascots to be gruff men with beards, as much as people in Norway probably like that sort of thing. We like to sort of like make a variety, so have dogs, have all sorts of weird characters. So this is Penny Pixel, it's kind of like our new sort of pixely platformer, and that's a dog called Sprite, who has a very cool tongue, who kind of like slops around everywhere. And she can jump as well, although it looks like she's farting, but don't tell our art team that. So Penny Pixel is going to be the character I'm using. So I hate it when people use cubes or just like white boxes. It's the most boring thing ever. Like you have a game engine and the whole internet. Why would you use just white plain stuff? Actually, yeah, I've left it in there. Shit. So Penny Pixel's there, and she's currently on this platform. So Penny Pixel uses the built-in 2D controller that we have with Unity. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be building up sort of the environment for her what to do and what she can go all live. So the first thing that we made is kind of a tiling system. So if I just create a very standard sprite, and then I set this to be a no, not that one. If I scroll down, where is it? Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff in here. I'm kind of ruining stuff that's coming in the top. So here we have just a simple background. So let's say I want to sort of like increase this. Obviously, you're going to have this horrible stretching. And obviously, you don't want in Unity or any framework to be copying and pasting like a billion tiles. You just want it to tile like normal. So one feature that we decided to sort of implement, which is pretty awesome, is you can set the draw mode to either be simple, where you can stretch it and pull it, or you can set it to be tiled. So when you set it to be tiled, as you increase it, it will basically pop in, and you can then instantly sort of change it. So you can set this to be, everyone's going, this is the really boring bit of the talk, right? It gets way better, okay? So what you can see here is that as you resize it, it doesn't like kind of do like a masky, hidey, revealy thing. Yeah, I really know technical terms, right? But you can see that when it reaches a certain size, it goes pop, 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 and then as you increase it, it's then going to do it. So you're always going to maintain that it is a square and it has this sort of graphic and do stuff like that. However, maybe I want it to hide and reveal. So here, so whenever we do like UX testing or show off features, everyone's like, can you just make more sliders? Sliders are awesome. Everyone loves sliders. They're like, it's just so fun. And buttons, just make more buttons, which is why we put buttons everywhere. So you can see that when I turn that off, I can now do sort of like, it gets way, like, come on, man, like. That's okay. So you can see that it basically will take any sprite and then tile it forever and ever and ever, which is really, really cool. And then let's make this kind of like dark, like kind of a low alpha, and let's render it in the background. So now we have a big fat background, and Penny Pixel can still jump off and die, but yeah. Okay, so she needs a platform to walk on. So if I just make like another sprite, and it's not platform. Wait, which one is it? I should really name stuff. Oh yeah, you're all students. If you want to, so I'm going to kind of annoy all your teachers here, but if you want to earn extra marks, name everything properly when you submit it. Don't call it untitled -PSD- finished -4. Don't do that, name it properly, otherwise your teachers get angry. You do get bonus marks. Sorry, I'm annoying all the teachers in Norway here. So, for example, with this platform, you can see that as I stretch it, obviously that's going to be a really horrible platform for Penny to walk across, but instead we can go to the tile system. Now, I don't want to have this hide reveal sort of like nonsense, because if I hide and reveal it part way through like a graphic, it kind of looks really bad if it just looks kind of like that. So this is a prime example of where I do want that kind of squashiness. So I pull it and then it will pop in, and then I can make this sort of like long platform like so. And then just add a box collider, which you can do all the time anyway in Unity. And hey presto, we have a little platform that will tile forever. Awesome, right. You haven't cheered, so I'm worried. Yeah, no, it gets better, like, yeah, come on. Okay, cool, and it hasn't crashed, this is amazing, cool. Not that Unity would ever clash. Yeah, that joke never gets dull. So we have this platform here. Now we want to do some more interesting bits and pieces. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create another 2D sprite, and I'm going to set this up to be the platform, like so. So I've currently got here kind of, it's not really like block-like, and it doesn't really tile that well. But you can see here I've got kind of this edge, and then I've got these edges around the outside edge, and I've got this middle piece that tiles in the middle. Now obviously if I wanted to sort of like use this as like a thin column, I could do something like that, and oh yeah, oh that looks horrible, that looks disgusting. So yeah, and yeah, it just looks really bad. So what you can do in Unity is like you can 9-slice basically using the sprite editor. You can 9-slice this piece and actually resize it. So this is already 9-sliced to define kind of where the top edge is and where the edges are. So if I set that to be tiled, and what you'll notice now is that as I increase it, it's actually going to look kind of good, right? And same if I shrink it down. Oh, okay, so if I increase it bigger, it looks pretty good, and then you see it popping. And if I shrink it down, it looks, that. Most people will probably be okay with this, but to me, I like to be a bit of a perfectionist with game stuff, it looks horrible. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to set it to not do kind of the stretchingness, and then you can see that as I hide and reveal it, it will basically keep that edge. So I can actually keep like a thin column or thin podium using that sprite. And then I can make another one, and then make this like a very, very sort of like short little platform, like so. And then let's like rotate it, and then let's make this one and duplicate it again, and then make this smaller, and make this kind of more chunkier. And let's just make this go forever, so it's like a tall podium. So you can see that from exactly the same sort of like sprite, you can actually resize it, and it actually looks pretty good. And then of course we want her to walk on it, so we just add box colliders to everything. So now what we should have, and if I jump, I'm not sure if she can jump high enough, hang on. So she has to do this run jump, yeah, ignore that. But you can see that with that one, so rather than beforehand you'd have to import 3 different images of 3 different sprites, you can import one sprite, make sure it tiles good. Yeah, technical term of tiles good. You can then basically then take it and then sort of squash it, and you can see it actually looks pretty funky. Right, that's all the boring stuff. Let's get to the good stuff. So sort of content is created outside, external to Unity, and then brought in. And what people really want is they wanted a way that you could kind of sculpt or create sort of, I'm going to get murdered for this, but calling it kind of like 2D terrain. So people wanted to do that. So they wanted to bring in sort of sprites and be able to create kind of like an environment. And so we made that. So here it's currently called Smart Sprite, which is a really dumb name. If you do have a suggestion for a name, please just like email me or come tweet me or whatever, or come say hi and say the name, and then that could go in. Obviously, don't call it your name, so don't call it Anders or Ole or which is pretty much everyone in Norway is called that. But I'm sorry, like I'm really sorry. Everyone in my country is called Dave or Chris, so yeah, that's fine. So we call this thing a Smart Sprite. And if I go here, let's actually move it down the platform because we want to build more of this world. So Smart Sprite currently looks like this, and it currently looks like just your average normal day sprite, which isn't the truth. You can actually grab out the points and sort of create a sprite or sort of like a sprite shape directly in Unity. And let's move this over to the platform because we want to make our world kind of go up a bit. So you can see that with the Smart Sprite, you can actually sculpt an environment. You can double click in between sort of 2 points. So you can actually build kind of like a world that looks kind of groovy like that. So let's do that and that. Now, this looks a bit too retro for my liking, of just everything sort of white and gray. So what we can do is we can also give a fill texture, or currently it's a texture 2D. We're going to change it to sprite. That shows how pre-alpha this is. And it hasn't crashed as well. So if we click the bullseye or the little nipple, depending on who you ask, I don't know what it is. We can then give it like a fill texture. Oh, and here's a funny bug with this. Yeah, there we go. No one saw that. And you can see here that it's basically made mountains. And again, we can add a collider to it, which needs to move to resize. And now we have a series of mountains. And let's add, oh shit. No one saw that. Yep, and so I built some typical Norwegian countryside. So I'm really lazy, so I'm just going to like move her here. And then now when we run it, we have mountains. So this is a sprite created directly in Unity. We haven't had to go draw this elsewhere and bring this in. This is basically a sort of edge directly in here. And you don't have to add a collider. You could just like use this to map out like a cloud or like a thing. And now I have some Norwegian mountains. It looks pretty cool. And now I can run around, but I can still jump off and plummet. However, this looks really, really boring. Now, we could play around with kind of how the texture tiles inside it, but what we want to do is we want to add sort of edges. So around the sprite, we have these edges. Now, everything I want to show you is going to change completely what it looks like and the application of it, but I thought I'd show you how ridiculous it is anyway, or sort of what it currently states at. So what we want to do is we want to put like a grassy edge around the outside. So if you look at any game made by like by Ubisoft or Rayman, they always have kind of this weird sort of like edge around everything. So what we can see here is that on the side, in the inspector, we have a thing called angle ranges. This is probably going to probably going to get removed, but I thought I'd show you anyway. So we have this pie, and what you can do is you can specify a maximum range, so you can specify a type of texture between one range and another range. So for example here, if you look at every single one of these, it's difficult to see, but every single one of these sort of points has an angle range. So you can see here that it will go from 13 to 47, and it will change around. And we can actually specify a sprite to be between those ranges. So I want the whole pie, so I'm going to set this to be 180 by minus 180 and 180. Now, here we go. This is true pre-alpha tech, right? Because the button to be able to set the sprite is in between these two lines. Oh, it didn't even work. Oh, yeah, there we go. So now we can specify, eventually this is going to change, so I think they're planning on, like, you can just drag and drop stuff directly in, but I don't have that build yet. So again, we click the nipple, and then we can apply grass around the outside edge. So you can see here that we now have pretty grass, and then we can add more points. And you can see that as I move it, it has the same kind of tiling tech that it did, that it uses for the 9-slice sprite. So we can create it looks a bit more, well, there's not enough snow, but yeah, it looks a bit better. So we now have this tiling tech. And again, if I run in here, you can see, if I actually get to like a flat platform, you can see that Penny Pixel, rather than running on the top, she actually runs on the middle. So if you have kind of like a platform, you can actually run along the center of that. That's good, and that's also bad. So it's good because you may want your character to be running sort of in the middle. But if you want something like, I guess, Limbo, but if you want something a bit more like Meat Boy, where you're kind of along the edge, it's very easy to change that. But I thought I'd rather bring in some rocks before I change that. So we have here the start angle, and currently it's everything. So I'm going to set a second angle, and I'm going to set this minus 180 to 0, so it's everything that's a negative kind of angle, so it's like an undercurve and things like that. And then I've got positive to 0, 180. Yeah, I know it's loads of numbers, and people seem to hate numbers. I don't know why. But we're going to change this eventually to be a lot more fluid. So what we can do is, on the negative 180 to 180, we can say, don't be grass, be instead rocks. And then on the positive, again, clicking most obscure button of all time, we can be grass. So now, if I zoom out here, or if I actually zoom into this bit here, if I add an extra point, and then add an extra point here, you see as I change it, it'll pop into rocks. So as you sort of like create new terrain, so let's do that there, and then let's like put that there. So you can see, so it's kind of, I think we're going to call it terrain 2D, I'm not really sure yet. But you can see here that you can already add sort of like a rocky edge around the outside edge, which looks kind of funky right now. So you can see here that, let's run over, is it Friends? The mountain on the way, no. Finser, yeah, there we go. So running around Finser, I mean, it's not as snowy, but you can see here that we basically have sort of like this edge. So you can actually specify different angles that things are going to be at. Now, like, okay, actually, I've got about 5 more things to show of this. But one really cool thing with this tech is rather than having sort of angular edges, I mean, I've hiked at the top of the funicular for like 2 days, and got very lost, of course. And I'm sure your mountainside isn't like this. So what we can actually do is we can actually select a point, and currently we have to go to the inspector here. We can actually set it to free, and you can actually change it to be a curve. So you can do this. So if I set this one to be a curve, it kind of does the upside down flip, but you can see here, and then as I change it, it tiles it. So let's set this one to be a free curve. Yeah, of course, it wraps it. But you can see here that we have that curve, and then as it sort of pops around and changes, it actually looks pretty good. And you can sort of like, let's say we have like a sort of a really sharp underhang, and then go. Okay, that looks crazy, right? I don't think any realistic world looks like that, but hey, it works, right? So yeah, you can kind of sculpt them, and every sort of point you can turn into sort of a curve. So another thing I'm going to show you is, I showed this in Oslo, and everyone said yes. So would you like me to change the grass into tentacles? Yes. Okay, cool. I know it's a dumb question. No one woke up expecting that to be like a question that was asked today, right? So what we can do here is, luckily for that question, I've prepared some tentacles. So we have here some tentacles, and you can see here that with this tentacle part, we can then change it, and then you see that all the tentacles kind of like stretch and sort of pop around to be with it. However, this doesn't really make sense with Penny anymore, because you see, oh yeah, it's kind of stiff edges, but tentacles aren't really like that. So you can see Penny is now inside sort of the tentacle. So you can basically see that you're running in the middle of it, and you want to run on the top of the tentacles. So what you can do is, rather than sort of like selecting every collider point and moving it, again, we've made another slider, because everyone seems to love sliders. We have a thing here called collider scale. So we can change this to either be sitting on top of the collider or in the middle. So you can see that as I sort of increase it, you can see that green line. Then we can go, that is now the top edge that you run along, and then we run along it. Let's get to the curve, and then you can see Penny is now running on top of the tentacles, and all we did was we moved a slider. Magic. And sort of one last thing to show with Smart Sprite before this is the boring stuff, before I get to the good stuff, right? No, this stuff's kind of fun, is these buttons here. So let's say, for example, we don't want the rocks in the middle. We can click this button. We can actually use this for kind of like a spline base, or like for clouds, or like vines or tentacles that you can run along and stuff. Yeah, and stuff like that. So I'm going to come back to Smart Sprite in a bit. But right now, I'm going to move Penny along and create a sort of another sort of environment using something that I really, really like. But let's make sure she works. Yeah, she's now running along the top of tentacles. How cool is that? Oh, of course, there's rocks coming out of tentacles. That doesn't make sense, but you can do whatever you want with it. So the next thing is, so currently, so far, we have kind of like, you bring in your artwork and you tile it, and it's very sort of staticky. And you bring in your artwork, and then you can kind of manipulate it. And then here you bring in your artwork, and it's kind of a bit, it's not hand-drawn, and it's not perfect, but you can kind of sculpt out environments and do sort of weird stuff. But the last thing I'm going to show you is the new tile map system that we're creating, which allows you to kind of combine a lot of these elements together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to game object, 2D object, and create a tar map. So the way that our tar map system works is it's never ending. It goes to like 640,000 squares in each direction, I think, or 64,000. And you can have as many as you want. And the way the tar map system works is it creates these grid lines, and then you paint onto the grid lines inside the pieces. So if I go to here, and I click this, we have obviously some painting tools. So this is just paint. This is basically like a fill square. This is like you select an area and then you can like paste it, erase, and obviously fill, right? We can click the paint symbol, and then down here we have a new window called a palette. And what the palette allows you to do is it allows you to store your brushes and basically sprites for actually painting into the environment. Now brushes I'll come on to in a bit, and brushes is kind of like it's not secret weapon, but like probably one of the coolest things that we're actually making at Unity. I'm not just saying that because I work there, right? And I'm being recorded. But yeah, brushes is going to be, it's going to change a lot of how people sort of like do things. So down the bottom here of this palette, we have all the sprite sheets that are in our project. So if I wanted to paint Penny, I can paint Penny into the tile map. So I'm going to go down here to, I know I was saying name your stuff correctly, but demo tiles map new is what I called it. And we have down here a sprite sheet that we brought in, and then selecting that paint, we can then select sort of like a cube from it, and then basically paint like a tile map into the section, which is kind of cool, I guess. We can then also, for example, like pull out a block. Hang on. Yep, there we go. Like that, and then undo it, and we can also sort of like erase whole chunks and things like that. And basically, the tile map allows you to sort of place sprites and objects in the environment. Sorry. So what we can do with this is we can obviously add sprites into our zone. Now, it doesn't add a separate game object per sprite. It actually puts it directly into the tile map renderer. So its goal is batching basically all sort of like the tiles together per tile map. And you can obviously use many, many different tile maps. Now, I've currently created quite possibly the worst temple of all time. It's horrible. And obviously, I've got here, every single tile is exactly the same. But what we can do is, in this tile map picker, you can also do crazy things like this. You can also select a whole strip of tiles. And then if I come up here, and then basically paint like whole strips, you can paint platforms. And then, of course, you can also rotate them. So if I rotate this round, I can then paint kind of like, angles and things. And the other cool thing is then with the color picker, or the picker, you can basically do something like this. So you can then grab that tile and then place loads of platforms in your environment. So yeah, so with this system, we're basically planning on people to be able to, I guess, place more content in your world and kind of do lots of really, really, really funky bits and pieces. So my temple looks a bit more interesting. Not that interesting, but yeah. Now, another thing I don't like is that I've used the same tile here. So rather than having to go, I'll go down here, and then I'll pick like that one, and then I'll like place that one there, and then I'll go down here and paint that one, and place that one here. That would take a long, long time, and artists would probably get fed up or drink loads of Red Bull to get through this pain. But what we decided to do is implement for programmers an ability to program tile map brushes. So what tile map brushes do is they allow you to paint, and they allow you to either choose random objects you paint or paint sort of trends. So for example here, I'm going to show you how brush scripting works a bit later on. So what we have here is we have a bunch of tile maps that are created. It's kind of self-explanatory what all of them do. Well, not really. They are to me. But for example, if I select this tile here, now when I paint in this environment, it's basically going to pick one of sort of 6 random sprites that I've assigned to it. You can see here that as I go through and paint it, it's choosing completely random tiles. And the same as if I sort of drag out a square, every single one is going to be completely different. So with a tile map brush, you can script really, really simple things that allow you to make it a bit more interesting. And let's sort of create a platform like that. So let's see if this actually works. Hopefully it does. No. So what we decided to do is we created a tile map collider. Oh, not that one. Bad. Hopefully that doesn't crash it. Cool. Tile map collider. So what the tile map collider is, it will, as you paint objects, it will instantly kind of generate the collider around it. So now, in painting that, we now have, yep, she has to do this jump thing. We now have an environment that we can run through, which looks random enough to not look like it's been hand-placed. Sorry. You're so quiet. So now that we have this environment, it looks super dull. And what you can do with the tile map system is you can actually create many tile maps that stack on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Game Object 2D Tile Map, reset it to be 0, 0, because at Unity it should do that, and I don't know why it doesn't. And then I'm going to set this tile map to be rendering in the foreground. So we have 2 tile maps now, one for our platforms and then one for everything in front of that. And if I go back down to my demo tiles, you can see here that I have various shrubbery. So I can sort of select chunks of the shrubbery and place loads of plants around in my environment. So let's put one there, and then let's like put one there, and then let's create some underhanging stuff like there and there. Let's put like, I have a little sign as well. So this sign is like this way to the Unity booth, or this way to nested prefabs, or yeah. I said to marketing, shall I call it like Penny Pixel and the adventure for the lost nested prefabs treasure? And marketing said no. So I definitely shouldn't mention that whilst being recorded. Oh well. And let's call this vegetation. So now I have this second tile map. What I can do is, oh look, cool. I then can run sort of like, yep, still do the flutter jump, but you can see that we can have multiple tiles, and that all sort of syncs up together. And then we can run in front of this sign. And you can do that with many tiles. You can have many tiles sort of stacking on top of each other, in front and behind, and doing all that stuff. So the next thing I'm going to show you is waterfalls, because they're kind of cool. So I'm going to make one more tile map until I make some more later on. And the next thing is sort of animations. So in Unity, we have a built-in state machine system that allows you to have different nodes and transition from one thing to another thing and do all that mumbo-jumbo. And our 2D team didn't think it was very like optimized or very professional to put that animation system on every single tile. Because if you think of a big tile map game, there's going to be like thousands and thousands of tiles. So what they decided to do is they decided to allow you to paint, or allow you to have a brush that paints in a sequence of tiles. Because the way that like tile map system works is they sort of cycle between sort of set tiles. So what I'm going to do here is I have a tile map brush for waterfall. And again, I'll show you how these are sort of made later on. And I can paint a waterfall. And if this is obviously on the foreground, I can paint a waterfall. So let's paint a waterfall like here. Yep. Actually, let's make it thicker and thicker. Why not? And I also have a tile map brush for waterfall fall. So let's draw that in a line. And then if I run that, let's see what happens. So she goes through her temple. And then you can see that the tile maps will cycle through from one frame to the next frame once every second. No, once every, I don't know. And it's very, very slow. So, and also she goes behind it. So one thing that we can do is underneath the tile map component, we could set the alpha, so we can sort of like shrink down the alpha. We could make this a waterfall of blood, but that's a bit demonic, and there's probably kids in the room, so I'm sorry. So we can set down the alpha so you run behind it. And the other thing that we do here is we basically can set the animation frame rate here. So we can set this to be 1. I think it looks best at 30. Let's actually see what that looks like. So yeah, so we now have a cycling through sort of like a waterfall. However, like the trend in video games is that for it to be truly AAA, it has to be 60 frames a second. So there we go, AAA waterfall, eh? 60 frames a second, AAA. It only needs to be reflective. But even then, you could probably do it because you could just write a shader that does it, right? So we now have sort of like an animating waterfall. And the way that this works is how our brush system works. So these brushes here, they come into brushes that you can create basically as sort of assets in your project folder. So if I select my waterfall brush, you can see here that my waterfall brush is just an animation brush script. And then you can have here an array of all the animations. You can set a min speed and a max speed. And if I open up this brush, this is all the scripts to basically write a brush. So programmers is really, really easy. So you basically have a grid brush class. You can expose. So you could expose like all the typical Unity publics, string, fisc, and yeah, and you can basically do all the normal stuff and expose all these public variables. And then we have here a couple of methods. So you have paint, which takes in the grid you're painting onto, because you may have many grids, and then it takes in the position on the grid, and all this does is it basically just goes to the tile map, sets the tile at that position, and applies that animation. You have set animation. So with this, and we're going to ship a whole bunch of example brushes, like animation brushes. That randomizer brush, we're going to ship that as well. We're going to ship like a whole ton. We've written some really complex stuff, and hopefully I have time to show you. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you can extend that as much as you want. So programmers can basically, why not? So programmers will be able to write these brushes. It's going to be really cool because these brushes you'll be able to script and then sell them on the asset store if you write a really crazy glitch brush or something. Or programs can write these brushes that are really simple and then give them to other members of their team to then paint things in the environment. So everything I've used, all the brushes I've used currently, all stuff is going to be shipped directly in Unity. So yeah. So we have this waterfall and it animates through these frames. And if I go back to that randomizer brush, which was this one, it's really simple. I just have an array of random sprites, and if I look at the random brush script, all it does is it picks a random tile and then places it. So it's like 2 lines of code to instantly randomize a lot of how you're sort of creating content in your game. Right, so what else should we do? What does this temple need? Oh yeah, this temple probably needs a massive pit, because all temples seem to have massive pits, right? No. no one in Norway thinks that. So I'm just going to sort of like erase some of this, and then let's paint some more of the wall. And of course, I need to reset it because it doesn't auto-update yet, which is why I did not show that. But you can see here that we have sort of like several tiles sort of stacked on top of each other. And another thing that is really, really cool, these tiles, is you can actually put in quite complex calculations into how you paint something. So if I create another tile map, and let's call this piping. So, and let's put this running in the background, so it's behind everything. And with piping, I can use this brush and paint a series of pipes. So we have here, if I actually move over here so you can actually kind of see what I'm doing. We have down here in the sprite sheet, like, I can't count, 6 different types of piping. And these are all the ones that you need to bring up. So obviously this one will be rotated for certain rotations, and this one would be a T-bar for certain. And you obviously don't want to select that. Go in here, click it, select that, go in here, click it. Oh, I need to rotate it. I'll rotate it round. And imagine if you had to design an entirely complex sort of piping system. So with scriptable brushes, we have one here. So it's called a pipeline brush. You can actually just paint pipes and do all sorts of stuff like this. And this is going to be one of the brushes that we're going to ship with it. But you can, hey, look, imagine if you had to hand place all of that. And let's go up here and do something crazy. Let's like, hang on. Okay, let's move up here and do something mad. So you can then sort of like select that grid and then sort of cut that out and, hey presto, you use piping. And then you could use that same piping and throw different types of sprites. You could put roads in there, you could put like anything, really. So we took this theory and we applied it to a guy called Wong. And he came up with this sort of Wong tiles theory where you can throw in any 15 different combination of tiles and build islands. So we said, hey, let's take his theory and throw it in. So the pipeline brush script is super simple. Well, if you're a programmer, it's super simple. If you're an artist, you're probably going to fall asleep. And you can fall asleep for the next 30 seconds or so. So all it does is it paints it, and then it updates the cell that you're painting it at. And then it updates the surrounding cell, so it gets all the ones nearby. But we're working on a much sort of better system of sort of putting this together, which will look a lot sort of less, a lot sexier. So if I go to this piping, with Wong tiles, they offered, well, Wong, he took this theory and we said, hey, let's take this like old theory and see if we can put this into Unity. So we did, and it worked. So using the sort of the same code from this and just changing the sprites, we basically took in his sort of tile theory and it just auto magically makes islands and stuff. Now, I'm currently doing this all in the editor, but all this stuff is accessible by scripting. So you could generate this like on the fly procedurally if you want to. I didn't have time to make a demo for procedural stuff, but you can access any tile via script. So you can do all sorts of really. So I could select a grid and then like, yeah, there we go. Okay, that's a terrible island. It looks really bad. And then of course I could get the color picker and select that. Oh no, wrong one. So let's say I zoom out and then let's get the grabber and then select that chunk. And then paint. Oop, it's going to get angry. Let's see if I can write Oslo. Oh, no, we're not in Oslo. Yeah, Bergen. Does it work? Yes, please don't crash. I'm actually impressed. Look. Yeah, there we go. So I wrote bug and using islands and pipes. And of course, I can zoom right in and then say, actually, this one should be plants. Yeah, so so let's actually go back to what I was, oh my God, that's a mess. What am I doing? So, okay, no one's going to see that when you actually play the game, so it doesn't, if it compiles, why care? Yeah. So we have here a bunch of pipes, and that's my game jam crate. If it compiles, yeah, okay. So we have here a bunch of pipes. You can see that I'm running sort of like, I have the pipes, and then I'm running, and then I have the waterfall, and then you can see that it's actually like merging all sort of the content together. Pretty cool, right? Sweet. So let's get to the cool stuff. So that's all good. You're placing 2D sprites, use script your own brushes. It's going to be amazing when people like get their hands on scripting brushes and doing all sorts of wild, crazy. I expect super crazy glitch stuff because that's generally what people do. And this is just stuff that we've made. Like these is just demo stuff we made internally. And we always say that when we're making features at Unity, it's kind of in a box. And then eventually, when we release them, that's when stuff gets interesting because people in the Unity community just make such crazy, mad. Like one guy programmed the whole of City Skylines. That's just madness. So yeah, when people get their hands on this stuff, it will be super, super mad what people can create. So we have here this. Now, what I'm going to do is, do I have time? Yeah, why not? So I'm going to create another smart sprite. And the smart sprite I'm going to put somewhere in my temple. So let's say, for example, I want to combine my smart sprite with the tar map. So I could script a brush that allows me to paint smart sprites. That's a bit mad. But instead, what I want to do is I want to have vines. Or do you want vines or tentacles? Which one do you want? Tentacles! Okay. One dude's like, vine, please. I should have known that a fishing village would ask for tentacles. So what I want to do here is add tentacles. So I'm going to add angle ranges. And let's set the entire pie. Click the most obscure button of all time. And click the nipple, and then do I have any tentacles? Yeah. So yeah, it looks a bit like that, and that looks a bit crazy, right? So what I want to do is, obviously, I don't want the middle piece to be there, so I cut it out, and then I can cut out the bottom bit, so you can actually see that you actually have kind of a spline. Now all these edges are angled. Are actually sort of supposed to be curved, so I can set this to be sort of like a curvy tentacle, like so. This is not really fitting into the temple theme, I guess. I guess the new Lara Croft Go has a snake that chases you. That's a very good question. Yeah. Depends on the temple. The temple with tentacles and nested prefabs. So I can set, for example, this tentacle sort of strip to be here, and then let's set it to be, I don't know, in the foreground. Actually, no, the background's probably a bit better. So you can see, oh yeah, so the tentacle is now behind the piping. So please don't die. Yeah. So you can see here that we then have the tentacle. And you can actually use like the smart sprite to actually combine and actually have some nice sort of vines and things. But this is where it gets interesting, because if I take this tentacle and put it on the default layer in the middle, and let's add a collider to the tentacle, and then I have to resize it so it refreshes. And that's kind of not really done it. Oh, yeah, I added the wrong collider, sorry. I do know Unity. So now we have the collider on the tentacle, and again, let's change the collider scale to be like the maximum on the edge. You can now see that you can actually use the smart sprite and combine that with the tarmap system for platforms. So we have here the tarmap, and then you can have here, we can walk along inside and then you can't actually get past this, so it's actually a really bad temple. But you could jump on the tentacle and then it dies, I don't know. Yeah. So we can combine sort of like all the things together. Now, this has all been 2D, and everyone here who does 3D games, put your hand up if you make 3D games. Probably like, this is totally useless for me, right? Unless you're going to make 2D games. So you can actually use the 2D tarmap system for 3D content as well. We didn't want to restrict people. So what we have here is, I'm going to create another tarmap, because why not? I can. And then what we have here is we have a coin. So this coin is a brush that, rather than placing a tile, it places a prefab of a 3D coin. So yeah, hang on, I've kind of ruined the spoiler. So what I can do is I can actually paint a trail of coins through my temple. And go down into here, and then let's make like a massive pit of coins. Of course, I can't even draw properly. You can see here that we've got like, so these are pasting basically like 3D coins. If I go into 3D mode, so technically every game in 2D game in Unity is actually technically 3D. So you can see here that we have the coins all positioned rendered orthographically. And this is where it gets a bit weird, because then you can actually select, you can actually take the tile map and move it around. So if I take the tile map, I can actually move the tile map around in the environment like so. Or you can even rotate it and do all sorts of weird, trippy, like... So technically you could do something like in VR and paint onto a tile map and do all sorts of really weird stuff like that. But let's go back in and let's see what the coins do. So the coins should be spinning, because all coins do. Yeah, so we have coins that we've just painted. So imagine if you had to hand place all these trails of coins. And then the coins then create 3D particles, and the 3D particle system now works with 2D colliders now, because it's only taken 2 years, right? Yeah. So you can see here that I then pick up all the coins. I'm like, well, hey, this is cool. The coins are in front of the waterfall, but it's abstract, so who cares? And then I can jump in and then yeah. So you can then actually paint 3D objects through the environment and do all sorts of weird stuff like that. So we have this really, well, I've kind of made this and try to explain it as best of my ability. That freaks me out okay. I've tried to make this and sort of explain it as best of my ability on kind of, on kind of the system that we've made here, and sort of all the different things you can do. So with the, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, for anyone who makes 3D games, I'm going to show you how you can use this for actual 3D sort of like placing of objects. So I'm going to save it, of course, and I'm going to come to this other scene. I should have some grass. So this grass is angled downwards, or angled sort of like so it's flat, and it uses the new the tile system. So it allows me sort of, well, yeah, tile up the grass and do some crazy stuff. So what I want to do is, my game currently runs like that. It looks super boring and dull. So what I want to do is I actually want to paint 3D objects. So if I go to Game Object 2D Tile Map, you can see that tile map is basically being created at like the X and Y sort of axis. And then what I want to do is I can then rotate my tile map by 90 degrees. So we then have a tile map that's kind of mapped off here. And then if I get my paintbrush, and I've got this road brush, let's paint Bergen. So I guess you kind of have that bit. Is that right? And that, no, wait. Hang on. So this is where like the fish market is, right? And then this is kind of the expensive pub. And then these are the colored houses that were in Teslagrad, am I right? Yeah, see, yeah. And then I guess it comes around here and then goes down to the airport, which is like 1 million miles away. And then the train station's around here, I think. So that's pretty good, accurate representation of Bergen, right? No. Well, yeah. That was the most sheepish like clap of all time. And where are we? We're like, we're right here, right? Okay, so this map isn't 1-to-1 scale, right? Come on. Yeah. So we have that environment, and I've just drawn that sort of like directly onto the 2D sprite system. That uses the same pipeline brush that I did before. So I'm using exactly sort of the same code, just changing out which sprites to load. So what we have here is I have here a tree brush. So let's say I want to place individual trees. Well, instead, what I can do is, using relatively the same code to the coin, let's paint sort of all around here. So what I can do is I can place and sort of paint sort of 3D trees, which looks a bit like that. And then you can also do like a grid. So let's do, so this is around the top of the funicular. See, I know my Bergen, right? I can paint like, hang on, it didn't do it. Yeah, there we go. So it painted like a grid of trees. Now, there's a couple of things I don't like. One, the trees all look like lollipops. And the other thing is all the trees look almost identical, apart from like any visual style and kind of like some color. But you can see they're all the same rotation, all the same scale, and all the same, and they're all positioned in the middle of the tiles. And you never, ever, I don't know how, I haven't ventured far into northern Norway, but I don't know if you've ever seen trees that are like perfectly like kind of angled like that. So what we can actually do is, rather than going in and actually selecting them individually, so I can select this tree and then like move that individually and stuff, I can actually rely on the brush to actually do all this sort of complex stuff for me. So again, here, I just have a brush. I can randomly scale it, randomly rotate it, and randomly position it within the tile. So rather it's in the middle, it's anywhere in the tile. So you can see here that I'll leave that sort of side of Bergen. I don't know if that's the good side. I'll go here and let's paint a bunch of tiles. Now you can see here that as I paint trees, they're randomly scattered inside, they're randomly scattered in height, rotation, and you can see that they're also sort of slightly positioned inside the piece. And if I actually draw like a grid, like although that's like a forest already, and then I could run around that forest. And you think if you had to hand place that, right? And let's zoom out and let's write someone's name. Let's write Konsoll. Does that work? Yeah, 2015. My handwriting is terrible. I'm so sorry. Thank you. So this is Bergen and Konsoll, and I'm sure the fjord route just sort of cuts through these islands. But anyway, so we have here sort of a forest. Now, using that sort of same vegetation brush, which is actually not that much, it pretty much looks identical to the coin prefab brush. What it does is as it spawns the objects, it just rotates them and positions them slightly randomly. We're actually going to work on a much better API for this, because the current API is you have your grid brush and then you place items onto the grid, but then the tiles themselves, or the pieces in the tiles don't really have like behavior, they don't really have brains for you to access later on. So we're actually creating two classes, a brush class and a tile class. So brush for placing, and then a tile class for actually storing information on each of the tiles. So if you wanted to have a tile that, let's say you run across and then it crumbles, you can do that, right? So you'd be able to place all these trees and give these trees different ideas. Ideas? No, you could give all the trees different sort of behaviors. The same, you could use the system to paint sort of like enemy units, and then like each enemy unit as it's placed has its own sort of behavior and stuff. And using that same sort of tile system, you could, and using the same script, I've also prepared kind of foliage, so I can, because Norway is littered with mushrooms and stuff, right? Yeah, so that's using sort of, and let's paint some like here, yeah. Okay, these roads are like, they're like Mario Kart now, where they just got stuff everywhere. But yeah, and then the same is I can also paint, using the same script for the coin placing, I can also place campfires. So I can place, if I actually select it properly, like campfires. So these are whole prefabs with like particles and lights, and I could, stuff gets a bit weird. And you can see here, like we then have a flaming forest at the top of the funicular. So if anyone lives up there, I'm really sorry. But yeah, so you can actually use the system to actually place things both in 2D and 3D. And then this is where it gets a bit crazy. And hopefully Unity, I'm saving like no tomorrow. So you could then also rotate the whole world and actually, you can map this on the side of a cube. And I could have all the trees upside down, and then they look like turnips now. So with this system, you can take this tile map and then sort of position it, place it, and do all sorts of really, okay, now it's all in like 2D, 3D space, but yeah. You could do all sorts of really, really weird stuff with this tile map system, and when it comes out, hopefully people will be able to sort of make some really, some really creative and mad things. I'm currently I have like 6 minutes left, I think. No, 4 minutes left. So that's finished the demo time. Now back to boring time. So what now? So all this stuff is available now. We have a pre-alpha build on our Bitbucket under 2D demos. And on our Bitbucket, we have a ton of other sort of like fun bits and pieces. You can download that build of Unity right now that I was using. So the one I was using is on there. It did not crash once, which is awesome. And basically download that demo and then actually sort of play around with it, use it, do all sorts of crazy stuff. I will go back to it. If you're going to take photos, I'll show that at the end. But we also have directly in the editor like a feedback button on this build. So if you want to give feedback on the time map system or whatever, you can click. I've already given my feedback. Oh, it actually works again. Cool. Yeah, so you can then give your feedback and whatever directly to our 2D team, and they'll read through basically everything, which is cool. So yeah, it is kind of a pre-alpha build. So if anything funky happens in other areas of Unity, like don't worry about it. But eventually that will then all sort of get molded straight into like the core build of Unity. And some of that stuff's coming out in December, some of it in March, and some of it in June. So we're sort of pacing out. Some of it will be moved around. but it's all on like a public roadmap. The exact dates it's going to come out. Talk to a UX team. So we have a dedicated UX team, and kind of the purpose of me being here is sort of show all this stuff way in advance. So rather than it looks like we're just kind of making things and then release it, and then people are like, wait, why did you make this? We want to show this stuff off like years or a year or 6 months or a long time in advance to see what people want, whether they like it, whether they don't, and basically get sort of everyone's feedback. So we have a dedicated UX team. We want your feedback. So you either give it back that way if you want to play around with it and say, this good, this sucks, this should be better. And you can also sign up for sort of user research directly with our UX team. So help us make Unity, I guess. Hopefully the URL is good. So you can either do this remotely or not, or if you're local in Copenhagen where they're based, you'll get interviewed by this guy, and he'll like sit you down on a sofa, and it's like a psychology type thing. And so yes, you can help us to make it via surveys, reports, whatever it may be. And our UX team are super lovely as well. I'm not just saying that because I'm being recorded, but they are. Yeah, and so like this isn't really related, but tell you the developer story. So we actually got around to actually buying Unity.com. Which took a while, right? Unity3D.com no longer exists. Well, it exists currently, but I guess we're doing loads of, like, a ton of 2D stuff, where you can sort of share your developer stories. So if you're making a game and you want to share kind of, so here we have a developer interview and developer story for this is not, well, the title's called This Is Not an RTS, but it looks like an RTS. And basically here it's kind of like a sort of a mini dev blog, just sort of like what they're making. You even put GIFs in there because everyone loves GIFs. And basically talking about how they made their game. So if you want to share your story or share how you're making a game or just put your game somewhere, put it there. And we'll be picking out games for our showcase and things and sort of like putting it into the show reel. So a lot of people come up and ask us like, hey, how do I get in your showcase? This is basically it. You can now submit your game rather than having a friend at Unity. 'Cause we're all your friends. And yeah, and we have Unity.com, which is amazing. And that's pretty much it. So with the 2D stuff, a lot of people ask us, it's like, is this kind of like a fleeting thing? Do you just ship the 2D tools and then that's it? Just to sort of like, all the people requesting 2D tools, kind of keep them quiet or whatever? And it's like, no, we actually have a full dedicated 2D team to making all this stuff. And that stuff I showed you, they're making so much more stuff on top of that as well, but it's kind of not at a state I can show, but it's on our blog and spoken about elsewhere. But yeah, we have a full 2D team making all this 2D stuff for you, and hopefully it will be awesome when it comes out and you get to play with it. So yeah, thank you. If you have any questions, I think I have 2 minutes left, so maybe like one question. Oh wow. And if you want to chat, I'll be around for this evening and tomorrow. Just come saying hi. I love playing games, so just come show and bring your game. If you have any feedback, just say. And whilst you do the questions, I'll leave that link up just in case anyone's taking a photo and I kind of skipped through it and you're all angry. So yeah, who's got a question about anything? It could be about Unity, it could be not. It could be what my Hearthstone login is, or how excited I am for No Man's Sky. It doesn't matter. I think there's a microphone, or you just have to shout really loudly.
So, are you familiar with a game called Jazz Jackrabbit 2?
With what?
Jazz Jackrabbit 2, it's an old 2D platformer.
But made by Cliffy B or
Epic Games.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't played it. I've seen it though. It's kind of. I think it came out before I was born, so I kind of missed it.
Well, it came with something called Jazz Jackrabbit Creation Station, which is basically Mario Maker 18 years before Nintendo did it.
Wow.
And it kind of reminds me of what you did there. It's pretty much the same thing.
So,
yeah. Well,
cheers.
it's not exactly the same thing, but it reminded me a lot of that. It's like you got all the in-game tiles and you could just mess around with.
So when we create features at Unity, we try to look at what is already out there, and also sort of what sort of Unity spin we can put on it. And we kind of saw that other tarmap systems, you can't really stray too far from the generic tarmap system of having a palette and then you add things onto sort of like a tile, right, into a tarmap. You can't really mess with that formula too much because is different, right? But we try to kind of put the Unity spin. So with the time map system, we didn't want it to remain entirely 2D. So we wanted people to be able to map. You could have a time map of a whole game like mapped onto a wall if you wanted to in a first-person shooter. So we try to look at that. I mean, there isn't really. Do you have any suggestions of how we could do that differently so it doesn't look like we've ripped someone off? Oh, cool. Oh no, I'm just saying how we make this stuff, because we do get a lot of people come up and say, hey, you just like kind of looked at how people do PBR and put that in Unity. It's like, well, yeah, because you can't really do it any other way, right? Yeah, so cool. I'll tell the 2D team, did you play Jazz Jackrabbit? Cool. Awesome. That wasn't really a question, so what?
Well, we're running over, so.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Hang on.
Yeah. But you're going to be there tonight, so if you have any questions that you want to ask, just write them down and surround him later, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Oh, is it Tuck? Yeah, Tuck. Cheers.